How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a very familiar location if you've watched the modded Miata madness. This is my dad's garage where he does all of his work, and yeah, I mean, he's been working through lockdown basically to help people get their cars up and running. But one key thing that he's been working on in particular is his Peugeot 206 WRC project. Now, there have been a lot of questions about the status of this project, where it's gotten to, and thanks to lockdown and him having a little bit more time on his hands, he has been working flat out on this project, and I am so excited to show you how far it's come, I guess. This is honestly ridiculous. Like, I know my dad is a very intelligent and useful and exceptional person when it comes to cars, but what I'm seeing in front of me right now is a joke. This is one man's job. I can take zero credit for this. I'm literally just putting it on the internet so that I can share it with you guys. Honestly, this is insane. So I hope you enjoy this video. I'll try and talk through everything. If I can't talk through it all, I'll get my dad involved and he can start talking through it too. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So here it is, the big reveal. This is where he's up to with the Peugeot 206 WRC so far. So I've changed the microphone, by the way. I've gone to my lav rather than my shotgun mic, so if it sounds different or strange, I do apologise. But let's talk you through everything on this car so far. So in the previous video, I mentioned the fact that he'd started to bond on the rear panels and the rear bumper, and obviously if I come around here, you can see a similar situation, and then all the way around there to the front too. And we had these rear turrets in that had been sliced out of the side of the car here, as well as over here as well. So these turrets allow for the suspension to fit in, which you can see is just in over the top there in terms of a bracket for it. Under here, you can see where it will come through. So it will all drop basically through here. A nice big piece of suspension, and then obviously wheel will come from here. And yes, by the way, this is going to be a four-wheel drive build, an all-wheel drive build. This isn't going to be a front-wheel drive car. This is a proper WRC spec car. This is not going to just be some random sort of half-assed job, as you can hopefully see by what's going on so far. But yes, the car's looking a lot more full than it did before. So obviously, as you can see here, it looks kind of like this whole side panel was always part of the car. Obviously, it needs to be painted, etc. But for now, it very much fits in with the line of the car. And then obviously here on the front as well, it's starting to take shape here too. If I come around this side as well, you get a good understanding of this side of the front of the car as well. So these are the key aesthetic bits that you want to see, obviously, in terms of the body panels. But then there's some good detail here as well. So on the actual 206 WRC car, they had these stands, so a triple stand point. In general, they only really use the front and the rear one from what we can actually see online, but my dad has still managed to put in all three of them. So these would be stands that would very quickly, you'd throw the car up on them nice and quick, keeps the car up and safe. And yeah, I mean, it's just a cool little detail to add into the car. The biggest change since the last video is this roll cage right here. Now, this roll cage, to buy it, I think it cost around £1,700. Rather than buying it, my dad built this himself, and he will be getting it FIA approved as well, which is ridiculous. So everything you see here, all of the welds, all of that kind of stuff, put together by my dad over the last little while. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty insane feat. So according to my dad, this took what, 3 weeks? 3 weeks of hard graft.
3 weeks.
Yeah, that's a long ass time to do basically a whole bunch of metal and a whole bunch of welding. So one thing I want to tell you about that part of the build as well is that if you see up here in the top of the car, these are all welded, and they're welded all the way around the top. It's very difficult, obviously, to get a welder in between the roof and this bit here. So my dad had to use quite a clever technique to do this. If you come down here and take a look inside the car, so if you look here, this is where the actual cage ends, and this is a new mounting point for it. So basically, rather than sort of building the cage right down into the car, you build these little boxes instead, and then you drop the cage down off of the boxes and then weld above the top of these so they're fully welded in place, and then you put the boxes back in place and then weld these onto the boxes and weld this into the car, so it remains structurally sound and obviously solid in place, because that's the whole purpose of having one of these roll cages. But also you have the top bit actually done, and yeah, it's a very clever clever way of doing it. I mean, if that isn't a testament to this guy's intelligence, then I really don't know what is. A couple of points from my dad basically around the back of the car here. So let's walk back around here. You've got the fuel tank will be coming in here soon. He mentioned that there are a couple of bits of the frame that aren't actually involved, so of the roll cage basically. So there's a bit that should be coming down from there and down from there, but he's ignored those so that he can fit basically a helmet in the back here, which is just making life a little bit easier since it's not actually competing in WRC, doesn't necessarily need those extra little bits there and there. On top of that as well, yeah, so mentioned the fuel tank and then the spare wheel will go in the back here as well, so that all requires fabrication to get into place. And yeah, instead that means because he can put the helmets there, they won't be suspended in midair, because in the actual WRC car they are suspended in midair here, and he's gonna have them on the floor instead. Now if you come around here and have a look in the cockpit, what you can see here, obviously in terms of the extended column coming out to the driver's seat, obviously that driver's seat is slightly higher than the passenger seat. I don't know if you can get a good perspective of that, but yeah, it's slightly higher, so that's how they basically had in the WRC car as well. You have your passenger as low in the car as possible, and then your driver in the correct position to see, because obviously the co-driver doesn't need to see, but the driver does. The co-driver needs to help get that center of gravity down nice and low, so yeah, they shove them down as low as possible in the car. One thing that's not on the car yet is this. So this is the duct, which should fit up there like so, but yeah, that's not yet in the car. He sliced it out using a laser cutter. Here you can see as well the hydraulic brake. So this is the very sizable hydraulic brake, a very cool piece of kit there. And in the previous video, you would have noticed that there was a nice big panel right here. It's like a center console piece that my dad fabricated himself. He's given that to a friend who is now redoing it in carbon fiber. So you're gonna have a nice carbon fiber center console sticking out right there. So if we come around this side here instead, as you can see here, you've got the bog standard cockpit area that you would expect, but then obviously on the other side of the car as well, you've got another one, because all of the actual information was on the passenger side as opposed to on the driver side. So the co-driver could see all the info and the speed and all that kind of stuff, and lots of it didn't actually exist here. You had the little screen, and so yeah, there will be a digital display here, but lots of the information was actually over on that side of the car instead. Obviously a few other bits and bobs missing from the interior of the car. Expecting to put a set of harness seat belts in, obviously for both driver and passenger, as well as the dashboard needs to be flocked completely, because obviously that's part of the way the car looked. And then obviously the doors will have to go on too, and the doors will require like carbon fiber door cards or whatever it is. Another thing that you probably wouldn't be that aware of, but he's also done, is that he's stripped out this whole section here. As you can see by those welds, he stripped out that whole section of the transmission tunnel and has had to obviously elongate it through the car, so that if I come around here, hopefully you can get a good idea of what this looks like. So straight down the car, you've got that long sort of tunnel, I guess, which is where you'll have the whole drivetrain coming through. And we will get onto the engine of the car in a second, but it's going to be very exciting the way this four-wheel drive system is going to be going on, and the transmission and everything. Let's jump under here and have a look inside the engine bay. So here we've got loads more to do, but this is what you can see underneath the bonnet right now. So this is a Peugeot engine. It's a 2-litre 16-valve engine that we've got sitting in there, and it is attached to a Mitsubishi Evo 8 block. Sorry, not block, gearbox. So if you take a look at this gearbox here and the bell housing, what my dad has basically done is that he's bought another Peugeot gearbox that would have attached to this more easily, and then he has basically taken the bolt holes from that to attach this bell housing from the transmission onto the engine. So here you can see all of the welds through there, and then this also is the starter motor section as well, which obviously doesn't come on the Mitsubishi's transmission, and so he's had to obviously attach that to here. And this is a whole bunch of work that has been done in order to adapt this transmission into this engine. Now you might be asking or wondering why you don't get an adapter plate instead. If you've ever seen like the Rocketeer kit for the MX-5s, for the V6, normally you would see a plate in there to adapt the transmission to the engine. But if we did have a plate in there instead, what it would do is it would move the transmission further out of the car, and the idea was to kind of keep the transmission within this space so that it wasn't going out of the actual guide rails of the car, because that would have been more difficult. And if you then tried to move the engine that way, you lose access to the belt, and yeah, it makes life a little bit more difficult. So instead, that was the route that was taken. a lot of work obviously gone into that in order to make sure that you can attach this Peugeot block to this Mitsubishi transmission. And then on top of that as well, a couple other bits in here that are worthy of note for now. These are the new engine mounting bolts. So this is going to be removed from the car again shortly to be stripped and rebuilt and redone in every possible way, and obviously also built for turbocharging too. But these are the two engine mounting points too. So these had to be test fitted into the car. Dad put those together and then obviously welded them into place. And they are on poly bushes as well. So there's a tiny bit of flex in terms of allowing the engine to move a tiny bit. But yeah, not a lot. It was better than sort of making it rigid into the car in that sense. Then obviously you can see down there, it comes out to the prop shaft, or where the prop shaft will extend out from as well. So another point to note about this gearbox as well is that it's going to be a 6-speed sequential dog box. So I think at the moment it's a 5-speed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's going to be a 6-speed sequential dog box, which allows for it to have a sequential shifter, kind of like you would have had in a real 206 WRC. So that's the whole idea, is make sure you maintain that, because it'd be a bit weird if you're in a WRC car but you're shifting as an H pattern. That would be a bit strange. So yeah, good to have a sequential gearbox idea or setup in the car too. And so yeah, moving on from the engine, one thing I wanted to mention too was the subframe under the car. So this is all being built in under here. This will have to get, I think, very slightly lower in order to be able to hold the transmission and the prop shaft, etc., all in place. There's going to be a few spaces that my dad is actually literally currently putting together as we speak that will fit in here to obviously make sure that this all stays in place properly. But yeah, this is another whole part of the car that's being worked on as we speak. I think the key things that are being worked on right now, obviously in there, under there, also obviously inside the car as well, a couple of bits that are worthy of note. It's just for detail. This thing here is just helping to make sure that you can marry up the dashboard here to here, basically, so that it looks fresh, because obviously you could just leave that open and whatever, but it doesn't look right, basically. So instead you fill this in with some carbon fibre, which it will be when it's done, and then it's all going to be flocked over as well, so that would be quite nice to see too. There's plenty more stuff I could go into, and each and every part of this car has taken that man over there absolutely hours and hours of slaving away. Since the start of lockdown, when he properly started getting into this project, this is how far it's come, and he's been working on it every single day. So this is not a messing about project, this is a proper long-term bit of effort that is going into this. So hopefully it's a good insight for you guys. I'll keep you updated on the process. I'll do more of these videos if you guys are interested in them, but I would want to mention the fact that this is probably why I'm particularly happy to buy older cars and work on them, because I know that ultimately where I lack the ability or the knowledge, I have that guy right there to do a whole bunch of the work for me instead, which is obviously very helpful. I want to say a massive thanks to the patrons as always. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.